Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the Risk Matrix podcast. And that's James Junkin.
Roll Tide, go Navy. Heart of college football season, man, it's coming to an end. I can't believe it, but I'm glad to be here with my good friend, Dr. Martin, talking about all things safety as they pertain to risk in this really interesting, really cool podcast. If I can say it myself, the Risk Matrix. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Roll Tide, James.
Roll Tide.
Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to read a little bit from our sponsor for today. You may be familiar with them. Today's episode of the Risk Matrix, powered by Veriforce, is sponsored by Mariner Golf and Consulting and Services. Occupational safety and health policies and procedures represent the foundation of a functioning and executable safety management system. Using a customized approach, Mariner Golf's technical writing experts work with your team to develop customized policies and procedures that meet regulatory standards and third-party verification systems such as Veriforce's Compliance Pro, industry best practices, and have withstood hundreds of OSHA inspections and hiring client audits. To get your world-class custom and affordable safety programs, visit marinergolf.veriforcenetwork.com. Hey, James, you know those people?
I might know those folks, man. I might know. Privilege to sponsor the podcast and to have helped people, achieve compliance, but not only achieve compliance, but get a roadmap to safe work.
Yeah.
Policy and procedure writing is hard. It's not for everyone. It is. You can be a great safety professional and still not be a great technical writer. It's a skill that many don't have, but every company is required to have a certain set of policies and procedures, and then tack on what third-party verification systems like Veriforce require, and then tack on what industry best practices there are. It's really a nuanced skill set that we're lucky enough to have a very strong technical writing team that's been doing this for many years. So, if you need assistance with your written policies and procedures, reach out to us there at the marinergolf.veriforcenetwork.com. One of my team will get with you.
Right on. These guys are good, and just don't stop there, because they do a lot of other things. And I'm not trying to toot James's horn here, but he does a lot of other things for compliance. So if you have any questions, give him a call. So today, James, you wrote an article recently that you posted on LinkedIn, and basically it's the top 10 safety topics that you really need to cover in 2024. And we're gonna do the countdown here. We can count up or count down, however you want, but I'm gonna let you address the first one, and then we're gonna go from there.
Okay, it's the end of 2023, and many times when we're having a year, and a lot of companies are struggling this year, whether it's economically or it's with occupational safety and health, the trend is not going in the right way when we're talking about SIFs, or when we're generally talking about workplace injuries. That we've had many discussions on this podcast and others about the challenges in the workforce, a younger workforce, a less experienced workforce, just getting workers to join the workforce. And it's been a challenge for 2023. And with the year coming to an end, sometimes some of us are like,
Woo!
I'm glad it's over. And I'm going to feel that way a little bit myself. 2023 has been super challenging. But guess what? Come New Year's Eve, when the ball drops, ding dong, it's 2024. And we still have responsibilities and obligations to provide the safest workplace that we can for workers. And one of the things that comes up pretty routinely in discussions is, what do I need to do for a safety meeting? Veriforce has safety meetings that we do that are provided to members of the Veriforce network. Some of my team actually develops those and presents those safety meetings in a live event. We do it in English and in Spanish. And so it's a resource there for you, particularly if you don't have time to plan your own safety meeting, or you're looking for some thoughts to go into a safety meeting that you want to deliver. Hey, what have people have done in the past? But too many times what I find is there's not a lot of planning that goes into safety meetings. Like 2 hours before we have to do a safety meeting, the safety professional, because they've been in the field, they're running around, right? They're doing job site inspections, they're doing training, they've got incident investigations to do, drug testing, all these things that go involved in being a modern safety professional. That, well, hey, let me sit down and throw something together because I have to do a safety meeting here in the next 2 hours, hour, 30 minutes, 15 minutes prior. And I understand the workplace pressures, but that is an important time. It's an important time because we've got everyone together and we're discussing the occupational safety and health needs that apply to the team. Now, you had a comment. I want you to go ahead and say it.
I do. You know, you're talking about people throwing stuff together, and what I want to make very clear about safety meetings, toolbox talks, whatever you're going to use or call them or whatever, they are a reinforcement of things that you already know, or that you've already trained upon, or that people have already received in orientation. And the points that you make in these safety meetings or these toolbox talks or whatever you want to call them, they need to be reinforcement, and they need to be clear about the things that are really the hazards that your employees need to be looking out for.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that before we get into the top 10 most important safety topics in general that you should be covering in 2024. A lot of people use this time to conduct training. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing assessments for many years now for Veriforce, for other entities, and this is something I routinely come across is show us documentation for XYZ training. Well, here we did a toolbox talk on confined space. Well, that's probably not enough training to make sure that everyone understands the roles of entrance, attendants, the supervisor. I mean, confined space can be very, very complex. And we ain't even getting into, you know, the aspects of rescue and et cetera. So a lot of challenges in trying to do training in safety meetings, none of which the least is the documentation of it. So we have absenteeism that we have to deal with. How do you go back and make that stuff up? So I like what you said about that, Dr. Martin. Safety meetings are meant to reinforce training that has already occurred. It's already occurred, right?
It's not retraining. It's not training. It's not any of those things. It's reinforcement of things they should already know that are very important to remember on an everyday basis.
Absolutely.
So James, lead us off with number one on your list. Number one
should be no surprise to anyone. Fall hazards. Fall hazards have historically been one of the most frequently cited and one of the most frequent causes of worker injury across all industries, but particularly construction industries. So fall hazards should be part of your plan for safety meetings for 2024. So how can we go about discussing fall hazards? What would be important in your opinion, Dr. Martin, to include in a fall hazard safety meeting? Because remember, we're not talking about end user training where we're going to teach people how to use a personal fall arrest system and all that. That should have already been done and people trained. What should we talk about?
Ladders.
Interesting.
Ladders. Specific instances that your employees use ladders and or fall protection in the places that they work, whether you're a service industry or a fixed facility, but where are you going to use fall protection in your everyday tasks that you're doing for the company? I think this is most important because we're not training again, but we're pointing out locations, we're pointing out instances, we're pointing out best use and best practices for those things.
I agree with that, you know, and I'll go a step further, reminding supervision that, hey, sometimes we get in situations in the field where it's a challenge trying to determine we got to work at heights, but because we didn't have a plan, we don't necessarily have a methodology in place to use an engineering control or use some form of elimination, we end up having to go and tie people off. It's always better. Hazards are best controlled in the design phase of the work. So when we're planning this work, if we don't have to work at heights, or there's some other way we can work at heights without using personal fall arrest system, let's look at that. So it's kind of twofold. I was talking to one of my guys today about safety meetings for us for 2024. If we took one topic, I could speak on one topic and different variations of that topic every month for the next 12 months. So fall protection is just like that, right?
100%.
Here's something else that I routinely find. Rescue plans. Rescue plans. It's too late to draw it up in the dirt once we have an incident. So safety meetings that discuss the topics that you mentioned, maybe throwing in some of the ones I mentioned, those are important things at the task level. At the task level. And that's where safety meetings ought to be focused, is at the task level. Too many times, I think, Dr. Martin, safety meetings are just a reminder of the generalities of the ABCs when it comes to fall protection. Yes, that's important. We need an anchor point. We need a body harness. We need a connecting device. But as you know, fall protection is a lot more complex than that.
It is ABC, right? But you should have that in your regular training. But we should be talking about it on the task level, on the site level, on the facility level. So, I don't want to make this too long on every topic. I think we've hammered that one home. Here's number 2. You ready for number 2?
Ready.
Number 2 is chemical exposure. And as an industrial hygienist, right? Maybe this is more on my mind than everybody else's, but everybody thinks hazard communication training, right? HazCom. I'm gonna give them how to read an SDS sheet, and we're good, right? No, we're not good. We're not good with just an SDS sheet, because you know what? Again, what are they using in the workplace, and what are they exposed to that we need to be aware of and be calling out the hazards on an everyday basis? Name some. Silica.
Asbestos, lead, hexchrome.
Yep. Things you buy at Home Depot, right? I mean, here's the thing. I see shops going out to Home Depot. Somebody says, I need, right? They grab something off the shelf. They have the company credit card or some money, and they're going to get reimbursed. And they buy something at Home Depot, and they're using it on a job, but nobody knows about it and what happens when something happens, right? These box stores have the SDS online, right? So we need to be kind of talking about what we're using on an everyday basis and the hazards that exist, and be looking for them.
One thing I find when we do these assessments is a lot of people that are doing training are doing generalized HazCom training. And that's a part of it, right? We need to know about pictograms and labels. We need to know about safety data sheets and how to read those, and what sections are super important when it comes to the physical hazards and PPE and controls and health hazards, things of that nature. But what I find is some of that training is too generalized. It's too generalized. We need to be training workers on the chemicals they're exposed to and how to protect themselves, right, from those hazards, and using a variety of methods. Then always, if we have exposure, what's the first aid procedures, those type of things. It's too late to start drawing things up in the dirt when someone has a corrosive in their eyes, etc. So safety meetings are a great time to remind workers of the chemicals they routinely deal with, and what the physical hazards are, what the health hazards are, how to protect themselves, and what the emergency response procedures are.
Nuts and bolts, everyday use, right? And you're going to see this with everything we talk about on these top 10, right? What's number 3, James?
Number 3, machine-related injuries. Machine-related injuries. Nary a job out there is performed without some contact of human and machine, right? And I'll be the first to say OSHA regulations are boring. If you have insomnia, I'll always recommend subpart O, machine guarding. If that does not put you to sleep, you're incurable, right? But when we're working with machines rarely make mistakes. Who makes mistakes? Human beings, right?
Yep.
Human beings. So when we're talking about safety meeting topics related to machine operations, the correct maintenance operations, reminding people of lockout, tagout procedures, reminding people not to shortcut certain procedures, in order to, clear jams, get the job done quicker, perform routine maintenance or whatever. Human error is predictable. It is predictable and it is likely. So if we know that, we definitely need to be talking about this, particularly, I would say, in these early months. Some people are going into shutdowns or turnarounds. We'll definitely see that in the South in the spring and up north in the Midwest as well. Hey, if we're going to be doing maintenance on activities, lockout, tag out, watch out for these man versus machine related injuries.
Lockout tagout is not just for electrical. All right. There's lots of stored energy, kinetic energy, etc. So I'm going to go to number 4 because we're going to slow ourselves down here. So number 4 is electrical hazards, right? And again,
Right.
I'm going to say you better be talking about what you're doing, right? You've already done training. You should have a robust lockout tagout policy. You should have a robust electrical policy. But if you are not talking about electrical safety and the nuts and bolts to remind people what they should be doing every day, you will have a problem.
I see a lot of times when I'm looking at companies' policies and procedures, they have a very robust written program around electrical safety, right? But electrical work is either qualified electrical work, which is performed by licensed, bonded, sure enough, know what you're doing, card carrying electricians, or it's non-qualified work, which is the rest of us. Now, I'll be the first to say, I don't know how electricity works. I do not. Electricity is magic, right? It's magic. How does it know to go home? I don't know how it works.
Click, right? We had actually a video about that in the 70s. I'm going to date myself, right? 70s and 80s. They used to show us how electrons move through through the wires, right? It was very comical, but you know what? It's more complex than that.
It's super complex. And when I see these very complex policies and procedures dealing with high energy and arc blast and all that other stuff, that is not something that the average worker is going to be exposed to. So we get caught up in all this terminology and compliance, and we forget about the basic electrical safety. Not to say that others not important, but I'm not having any of my team out there working on that transformer. That's an electrician that works for the power company, right?
Right.
Or a qualified electrical worker that works for the power company. So electrical hazards in the workplace, though, are numerous. Do you have an assured grounding program? Do you have a GFCI program?
How does this relate to the worker on the job and what they should be looking out for hazards? Okay, you ready, James? Number 5.
Confined space.
Confined spaces. What are the high points of a confined space? And we could go down into the weeds on this, but what do workers need to know about confined spaces and be reminded of in a toolbox talk?
Most workers are not going into confined spaces. That's really a specialized task that's done by additionally trained workers, right? So if I'm cultivating my safety meeting, if I don't have workers going in confined spaces, I really want to focus on the definition of what is a confined space, number 1, and what is a permit required confined space, number 2, and the fact that these workers need to stay out of that. And if their tasks require them to enter these hazardous permit required confined spaces, they should exercise their stop work authority. Now, we shouldn't just show up at the job and all of a sudden discover, hey, there's a permit required confined space. We've done what we're supposed to in the pre-planning. That won't happen.
And if there's any confined space, right? If you don't understand or you got a problem or you need to call somebody, call somebody, right? Call the safety professional, operations, whatever, and ask the question, because stopping the job will sometimes save your life, right? A lot of times it will save your life, especially in a lot of these serious injuries and fatalities. If they had stopped the job and taken the time to phone a friend or phone somebody, might have been a different outcome. Okay, now, you ready for the next one?
Not yet. For those workers that work in permit required confined spaces, ventilation is your friend. Ventilation is your friend, whether it's mechanical or natural ventilation.
Well, make sure make sure you know about ventilation before you do ventilation, because just shoving some kind of a device in there and calling it good is not good.
It's not good. You need to have a ventilation plan. This is, again, safety meetings are to remind you of the training you've already received. You should be planning this before you get to the job. But proper ventilation is a friend when you're working in permit required confined spaces. Number 6, this is one that I have a passion for, and that's noise-related health risk.
All right, you ready from an industrial hygienist point of view?
Sure.
Right, wear your hearing protection, right? You know, I have a friend who their grandparents worked in factories, and it was not fashionable to be wearing hearing protection, and they can't hear, right? My father in the military, right? When there wasn't any hearing protection, also has hearing problems. Shooters, people who should be wearing hearing protection, don't wear hearing protection, also a problem. You know what? There are all kinds of hearing protective devices. You should be talking about this with your employees. What do they need? What do they want? What looks good? I don't care, just so they'll wear it, okay? And here's the kicker, right? Because I talk about this a lot with people and they don't understand. There are also hazards of working in environments where you have chemicals that can have, and I'm going to use a word here, you don't have to remember it, ototoxic effects, right? That cause hearing loss due to the chemical exposure, right? So, oh my goodness, you don't want to be 50, 60, 70 years old saying, huh? So you want to make sure your workers understand the importance of hearing protection and that they can come to you and talk to you about their options.
I had an old timer one time, Dr. Martin. I was teaching a class, and this guy was in the class, and we got to this section about occupational noise exposure, and he said, let me ask you a question, son. What sense, if you had to lose one, would you give up? And I was like, man, I don't know. He said, let me rephrase the question. Would you rather lose your sight or your hearing? I said, man, I'd rather lose my hearing than not be able to see. He said, I thought you would say that. See, sight connects you to things, but hearing connects you to people. And
man, if
powerful.
People don't take that away from this show, they should take that again. Say that again, James.
Sight connects you to things, but hearing connects you to people. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because, you know, my dad worked in an industrial environment back when there was no safety. Safety was put a Band-Aid on it. They didn't have hearing protection. Nobody knew about all these things that we have, fortunately, the benefit to have now. And as he got in his late 60s and early 70s, you would talk to him and you would say things and he would answer inappropriately. He'd be like, yeah, you know, Dad, do you want to give us all your money? Yeah, that sounds good. You know, he couldn't hear what you said. And so in the waning days of his life, when we needed to be connected the most,
yeah,
we could see each other, but we couldn't communicate. So the good news is all that can be prevented, and reminding workers the importance to wear their hearing protection, to report opportunities for wearing hearing protection, the need for maybe noise surveys, things of that nature. That's what we should be discussing in these safety meetings, because once it's gone, it's gone.
Okay, next one is respiratory protection. I know these are big topics, but you know what we're trying to do here is bring you to the down-to-earth nuts and bolts, right? We're not talking training. We're talking about specific things that your workers can do and be aware of on an everyday basis. So respiratory protection, what are your top issues?
Well, one, identifying the need for the right respirator, but inside the standard itself, it says, you know, and perform the necessary evaluations to the program's effectiveness, right? So in safety meetings, sometimes I like to not just have me giving information, but getting feedback feedback. Or do we have the right respirators? Are there problems with the fit that you have with these particular respirators? Do the respirators we give you actually cause more problems than what we're trying to protect against? So, respiratory protection, again, is one of those very complex topics. As you know, Dr. Martin, everything from an N95 dust mask all the way up to positive pressure demand type SCBAs or supplied air respirators. So you really got to customize this to the needs of your organization. But respiratory protection is one of the topics that, is near and dear to my heart, because once you inhale it,
you inhaled it.
There's no fixing it, right?
Yep.
So,
and I'm gonna go ahead.
So as we're getting back into season of illness, and COVID, I'm sure will come back, particularly in the winter months. We'll always have the flu, those things. If you're going to require people to wear masks, just a reminder, if you require them to do it in a work setting, that means that you have a functioning respiratory protection program and all the elements that go through that. So again, safety meetings are not training, but it's a reminder of people to wear their respiratory protection and get feedback as to whether the respiratory protection that we're providing is effective for what they're doing.
I'm going to add one more thing, and then we're going to move on to the next topic. We're also, you'd like to have a little chuckle there, but we're also going to wind this back to chemical hazards. We're also going to wind this back to silica, as we mentioned, lead, asbestos, all of the things in the workplace that a little dab will do you, right? And you can wear respiratory protection as one of the things to help you protect yourself, right? And so we should be aware of those things that we need a respirator for and that are in our respiratory protection policy, right? It's a good thing to remind people of, especially on a job-related, task-related basis. Number 8.
Fire and explosion hazards. As someone who works in a high hazard industry with around a lot of flammable and combustible materials, this is one of those things that we need to be constantly reminding people of at the task level. So one of the things I've noticed here of late is inadequate monitoring. So a safety meeting topic for fire and explosion hazards might be reminding people how to use the combustible gas monitors, how to bump test them, how to calibrate them, the need for actually doing that, determining what an LEL is. And then also when we're working in hot work situations, that we are making sure that combustible and flammable materials are at least 35 feet away, things are covered up, and it's part of our daily job function if we're performing hot work, and probably a condition of the work permit as well, to ensure these steps are in place. So I think it's a good time to remind people. It's also a good time to talk about regular fire extinguisher inspection. Now, we do usually do a pretty good job of inspecting fire extinguishers in a facility. You know where we do a terrible job of inspecting fire extinguishers? In the vehicle.
The vehicle. In the field even, right? Just grab one from the shop and put it out there, right? And they need to be included in the inspection policy, and they also need to be, we need to have some, that's one of the things that I will say, it's not training, but you remind people of the mechanics of using a fire extinguisher, when it can be used, and when get out is what you're supposed to be doing. Incipient fires, right? We're looking at incipient fires, which is a small fire, something that you either need to egress where you are, or it can be, extinguish the fire extinguishers. I'm gonna add to your fire and explosion hazards, fire watch. What constitutes a fire watch? Right here in Boston, we actually have other fire watch regulations that go with the city of Boston. What you need to have, who you need to have there, what the requirements are, in addition to OSHA.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's a good time to remind people the fire watch shall have no other duties. Okay. It's easy to get into the work task and have the fire watch run to the tool room and pick you up whatever supplies you need, or jump in the truck, or come down here and help me lift this. The fire watch shall have no other duties for a reason. and that's to intervene in the event that we have a fire hazard before it grows beyond the incipient stage. So a lot of different topics we could discuss related to fire and explosion hazards, things of that nature. Hey, make it real, make it fun, make it to where people have a reminder and an understanding about these particular fire hazards that are unique to your business and your work situation. All right, the next one, material handling and ergonomics.
Do you want me to say it or you want to say
You
it?
say it.
I mean, a line from that I like to say is ergonomics is a voodoo science, but people do get hurt. I will admit they do get hurt lifting things and doing inappropriate lifting practices. How you measure that, how you correct that, I mean, the jury is out on that for me, because there's a million different ways to do it, but we can be reminding people of what they should and shouldn't be doing manually, right? And by manually, I mean as a one-person lift, as a two-person lift, the things that they handle every day, whether it's pipes or bags of concrete or any other materials, how they should be handling them, how they should be storing them, okay? That we're getting from manual to material handling, right? How they should be storing them and how they should be documenting or thinking about how to lift them and move things across a site or a facility.
Man, we could talk about ergonomics for 2 more hours as it relates to the workplace, whether it's office ergonomics, you know, that's one thing as a safety professional. We're always focused outward into the field. And probably rightly so, you know. I can make up whatever statistic you want to have here about the hazards, but the vast majority of hazards we're thinking about, whether they're mental or physical, are in the field. Well, every company has office workers. Every company has people that are support, including safety professionals sometimes, that work in an office setting. I just want to remind people that, hey, when you're giving your safety meeting, you're talking about manual lifting and ergonomics. It's not always that we're outside picking up a 50-pound sack of concrete. How about copy paper? How about reaching and having strains?
How about the water for the water cooler, right? I've seen that, oh my gosh, 100 times if I've seen it once.
Absolutely.
You know, just mishandling things. So
carpal tunnel, all those things that go along with that. So that's an example of how you can take a complex topic and divide it up into different sections to meet the needs of different people within your organization.
Right, right. Okay. Number 10.
Psychological stress and mental health.
All right. This is a big one, right? It doesn't hurt to talk about it more than once. Okay. This can encompass workplace violence. It can encompass stresses that people bring into the workplace. It can encompass my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper, where you're looking out for people. I mean, there's a plethora of different ways that you can look at this topic, right? But it is important, because if people don't come to work and they're not ready to work and they're not fit to work, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, bad things can happen. So how do we cover this, James? I mean, this is such a broad topic.
You know, one of the things I think is companies are waking up that they need a resource for assistance for workers. You know, for many years when we talked about an employee assistance program, what we really meant was drug and alcohol abuse rehabilitation programs. But many companies are finding that, hey, we need to expand that offering to include mental health, and that also encompasses, you know, psychological stress and all the things that go along with what impacts the mental well-being for the worker. You know, workers don't just perform tasks in isolation. They have outside influences, they have inside influences, all that adds stress. And you're moving into the holiday season, you know, suicide rates are up among a variety of different workers, including construction workers. I was on a phone call, just a Teams call, if you will, just last week with a colleague in the UK, and they had experiencing the same problems we're having in their construction industry as we're having in our construction industry, which is increasing suicide rates under younger workers. Look, those workers have all sorts of stress outside the normal family stress, just being a human being stress that's there. Many times they have economic stressors, they have work harassment stressors. You know, you may have an enormous amount of bills, then you chop onto that, you know, all the things that go along in the dynamics of just being a human being that lives on this planet that has to deal with other human beings. So if we don't talk about it, they're not going to talk about it. We have to take the stigma out of it. And that's one thing that we've struggled with in the veteran community. You know, 22 of my brothers and sisters claim their lives every day. Every day. Veterans Day, the day before, the day after, the next week, every day, at least 22. And many people would not reach out for help because they didn't want to be stigmatized. They were afraid it would cost them their promotion or other opportunities, or maybe even a discharge from the military. So we've overcome that as a service now. You know, it's okay to say you're not okay and to get help. Mental health is as important as physical health. And too many times I think we as safety professionals only talk about the physical, we never talk about the mental. Hey, talk about this stuff and relate it, I would say, not just in a single safety meeting, although you have to have a safety meeting, talk about that, but start equating mental health the same as you do physical health in your JHAs and what you do at the task level daily basis.
And you can start that conversation with fit to work, right? And fit to work doesn't mean always just, am I fit to work, right? Because as you said, people are not, they're reluctant to say, I'm not okay, right? It's getting better, but it's hard to say I'm not okay. But what we need to realize as other employees around them is we need to start looking at warning signs, things that don't sit right with us, and be, you know, okay, saying, I don't think this guy is okay, and we need to take action on it. So this is something that you communicate to your employees in a very kind and caring manner, and hopefully that's, you know, number 10 there is really important. So that's our 10. That's our 10 that you talked about, right? And in your article, you listed a bunch of places that you can go to flesh out these safety meetings, to get resources, to do research and put some punch into those toolbox talks and safety meetings. But remember, we're talking with our employees, not just at them.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure I remind people that are members of the Veriforce network, once a month, a safety meeting topic is emailed to you with a username and password. That username and password opens up our entire library of safety meeting resources that goes back probably 20, 25 years since we've been doing that. So if you're a safety professional in a bind, you can reach into those. You can use those as is. You can modify them. They're a tool to put in your toolbox, along with the other tools that Dr. Martin mentioned in the article that's on LinkedIn. For example, OSHA.gov. Okay, OSHA.gov's got a lot of really cool resources. The Center for Construction Research and Training, www.cpwr.com, is one that I use a lot in getting things together. WorkSafeBC.com for our friends up in British Columbia. The Canadian Center of Occupational Safety and Health that goes along with that. It's a good place for you to go. The National Safety Council, the American Society of Safety Professionals, FEMA.gov. Those are just some that are right there. Some state agencies also have some more state-specific resources, but reach out, put some planning in your safety meetings because it's important. It's important. It's not just a mere formality.
All right. Thanks for listening. And again, this has been the risk matrix. And I'm going to say this: if you like what we're doing, if you don't like what we're doing, if you got comments on what we're doing, make a comment below or on LinkedIn when we make our posts. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can subscribe to us and get pestered about the new content that we put out every week on Tuesday around noon Central Time. Like, follow, share, do everything that you can do to get the word out there, because we're going to be bringing in the new year. We're going to be bringing more topics, not just safety, but risk as a business and all kinds of different stuff. So, James, you got anything to add to that before you take us out?
No, smash that subscribe button, and y'all keep bringing those workers home safe.